Good morning, good afternoon, good night to all of you. Welcome to Plenary Session 3. We're going to start the session. I would like to welcome all the participants to the third plenary session of the World Human Rights Cities Forum. I am Amanda Fletty, coordinator of the Committee on Social Inclusion, Participatory Democracy and Human Rights, and co-organizing today's session with the UCLG-CISDP. And I would like to welcome the Secretary General of UCLG-CISDP, Mrs. Bernadia Chandradawi, to make her open remarks and the introduction of this session. Bernadia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, distinguished mayors, dear participants, dear speakers. Very good evening, very good morning in Europe, and greetings from UCLG-CISDP Secretariat in Jakarta. I'd like to welcome once again all the participants, speakers to this, the 10th World Human Rights Cities Forum, the plenary 3 of the forum. This is also to commemorate 40 years commemoration of the May 18 democratization movement of Gwangju citizens who stood up for democracy and human rights in May 1980. We regret that we couldn't meet personally during this time, but I'm very sure all our commitments are still strong in promoting these human rights in our cities and our regions. So I would like to welcome once again all distinguished mayors and participants and speakers. I'm very sure we will be having a very lively discussions today because this is extremely important during this pandemic that is affecting almost more than 1 million people globally. And we know that local governments are the frontliner in responding to COVID and protecting also the life of our citizens. So we would like to hear later from all the speakers how the cities in your place are responding to COVID and also preparing the recovery plan from this COVID-19. And very sure that we will address importance of human rights, whether it is in the protection of the people, whether we will also looking at the vulnerable groups, as we know that the COVID-19 has been affecting not only health issues, but also economic issues, as well as the social issues. We also know that a lot of vulnerable groups like women and children have been also affected by global COVID, the pandemic that occur right now. And also we see like in many cases, the domestic violence has increased more than 300% in some areas, and general around 30 to 50% increase. So this is all related very much on the human rights topics that we are also discussing today. So let me also share with you how this session will be operated or will be conducted. We will be listening to distinguished speakers, and we will also have a discussions. And we are opening the Slido. This is the organizer will be giving you the link in the chat. So you can put also questions, whatever you like after you listen the presentations. And we will be having the question and answer session in the end of the presentations. So we will wrap up at 10 p.m. of Korean times. So let me now invite the first speaker. It's a keynote speech by Ms. Gabriela Ramos. She's the Assistant Director General for Social and Human Sciences of UNESCO. She's going to present this through the video message. So I would like to invite the organizer to show the video message of the Ms. Gabriela Ramos.
Welcome to the third plenary session of the 10th World Human Rights Cities Forum. co-organized by UNESCO and United Cities and local governments. My name is Gabriela Ramos, Assistant Director General for Social and Human Science of UNESCO. And I want to thank the city of Gwangju for hosting this very important event. For this session, we will discuss local governments building the post-COVID-19 world, public services and human rights challenges. Cities are at the vanguard of defending and safeguarding human rights, as they are at the front lines in the manifold challenges besetting our contemporary societies. Rapid urbanization, human mobility, climate change, rising poverty and inequalities, and now, as if we didn't have enough, the COVID-19 pandemic. The crucial role of cities was once again demonstrated during this crisis, where the local responses called for the need to prioritize the most vulnerable groups or those that have been most affected, including women and youth. During the crisis, cities have been at the forefront to provide services, to save lives, and to save livelihoods. Action had to be strengthened, given that even prior to the pandemic, socioeconomic inequalities were on the rise, and they have been manifestly magnified during the current juncture. Over the years, local governments have made progress in advancing economic, social, and cultural rights through the development of inclusive social policies and the delivery of public services, including in the area of education, health, and economic security. In a highly unequal world, the commitment of local governments in protecting and promoting human rights and delivering on those services is now needed more than ever. The commitment to localize human rights, including through the promotion of the Sustainable Development Goals, should be at the heart of every human rights city's mandate. But human rights is in its broader sense, including the right to socioeconomic development. And I want to quote Amartya Sen here, who said, development has to be more concerned with enhancing the lives we lead and the freedoms we enjoy. And it has to be people-centered. UNESCO has made strides in advancing a global narrative of how cities can contribute to the goals through the SDGs and the Habitat 3 New Urban Agenda. Through the International Coalition of Inclusive and Sustainable Cities, a global platform of more than 500 cities around the world, UNESCO promotes the significance of the human face urbanization in today's world. The cities act with a common voice that strive to fight against the social ills that arise from the current social transformation. This has focused also in promoting gender equality and youth empowerment as essential ingredients for urban inclusion and have set a pioneering example of global solidarity and cooperation among local and regional governments. Once more, in the current juncture, we should focus on women and youth. We should avoid a lost generation as a major casualty of the COVID crisis. But we know that COVID have actually had huge impact on our lives and on our cities. UNESCO data on the access to employment and financial services in a number of sub-Saharan African cities is just huge, and the impact is more felt in the most vulnerable. 70% of the population had difficulty with access to employment services, while 54% had difficulties with access to financial services. In addition to these barriers to accessibility, discrimination was prevalent among the population surveyed during the COVID-19, with social status as the most widely reported discriminatory factor at 24% of the responses, followed closely by political identification at 21% of those that responded to our call. This really calls for renewed action against discrimination, and cities again play a crucial role in ensuring that people are free from this evil, from racism, from violence, which, just like socioeconomic inequalities, tend to be compounded in times of crisis. We cannot ignore the example that the very unfair burden that has fallen in women's shoulder, be it as a health staff, as caregivers, or as the so-called essential workers. Even worse, as victims of unacceptable levels of violence, women had really been at the core of this agenda. In the 12 months before the pandemic, gender-based violence affected 243 million women and girls. The pandemic actually exacerbated this growing problem, exposing women to threats to their personal integrity. With aggravating factors such as isolation, financial and food insecurity, unemployment, and the impossibility from escaping their abusers, this number has increased massively. Only days after the lockdown measures, domestic and intimate partner violence increased from 30% to 50% in certain countries, according to UN Women. And actually, they didn't have the services to counter this threat, even the security services. One of the most striking facts is that women have been affected 1.8 times more from the pandemic, 1.8 times more from the pandemic, considering the economic impact when you compare them with men, increasing, of course, their initial status of vulnerability. This is a well-known vicious cycle of women being more vulnerable, so in times of shock, things can only get worse. Therefore, we need cities to focus on gender-based responses to the crisis. Differently from the 2008 financial crisis, this time the sectors that are more hardest hit are overrepresenting women. There are 527 million women workers in accommodation and food services, real estate, manufacturing and retail trade, and 42% of women in informal economy in those sectors too. Many women and girls among the rising UN estimate of 214 million people who will be living in poverty. Girls are also more affected by school closures, and many will never come back. So human rights issues are at the forefront of the response to the pandemic. Now more than ever, it is important to recognize the magnitude of its adverse effects on the protection and promotion of universal human rights, and to collectively reflect on the way forward. Today, local human rights measures are mainly focused on mitigating the effect of COVID-19 pandemic in exacerbating existing social issues, with local governments worldwide showcasing their creativity and determination through the best response practices. However, beyond mobilizing local efforts, it's equally important to be able to analyze with a careful eye, an open mind, and an innovative lens the adverse effects of the crisis on the most vulnerable groups and evaluate the various modes of recourse that can be taken to protect them. Thus, we can move forward from this pandemic to build the next new normal that will be better if we take the right decisions and if we prioritize again the vulnerable groups. I cannot emphasize how much we really need to prioritize vulnerable groups. This is an unprecedented time for the international community and must be handled with the utmost solidarity, collaboration, and innovation. As we engage in the critical dialogue about our challenges and efforts during the crisis, let us encourage one another to be resilient and to uphold the support of empowerment of citizens. It is in this regard that we must mobilize our resources and work together in order to use our collective synergies to effectively rebuild the world in the aftermath of the COVID-19. If we want to build back better, we know where the efforts should be put and include the social inclusion dimensions through a human rights-based approach at the center. UNESCO stands ready to build partnership, starting with the city of Gwangju, as well as with other actors in the forum to advance this agenda. Let us take concrete action and work collaboratively through our networks. This is through partnership towards a common goal of inclusive urban governments that the best interests of humankind will be served. Once again, I warmly welcome to the third plenary session of the 10th World Human Rights Cities Forum. May it be purposeful, productive, and progressive for all of us. Thank you very much.
I'd like now to invite Mayor of Central Hawke's Bay from New Zealand, Ms. Alex Walker. Please, time is yours.
Ina mana, ina reo, ina karangarangataha, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. My name is Alex Walker. I am Mayor of the Central Hawke's Bay District in the North Island of New Zealand. I have greeted you in the words of our local Indigenous people, the Māori people, who welcome you not once, not twice, but 3 times, and it is the sign of their generosity in how they work in our communities. And it's important that I reflect that as I speak with you today, because they're a very important part of our community. I want to thank you very much for having me as part of this plenary today. And I want to speak about how people are at the heart of local government and how important this has been for us here in New Zealand and for my community. In New Zealand, local government is responsible for some very important infrastructure and services that ensure our society operates efficiently. But integral to our success is the voice and the visions of our people in our communities. We call this the well-being of our communities. And in my role as mayor, I want to see this. I want to see people at the heart of everything that a council does. And in doing this, council's not only addressing their legal responsibilities for delivery of infrastructure and services, but is providing leadership, advocacy, and improving well-being for the people and the places that they serve. So the human rights of our communities and all parts of our communities are essential to what local government means. This approach has served us well in my district of Central Hawke's Bay in New Zealand. It served us well as we have responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. We had existing strong networks of relationships across government and non-government agencies and community groups here in our part of the country. This allowed us not only to deliver the lockdown approach of our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and her government, but also to ensure that all members of our community, no matter their age, their race, their gender, or their socioeconomic situation, were able to be cared for. And this was a reaction that could only have come from local government. Central government provided us the policy platforms and the tools to help, but actually it was our ability to know our communities that made that response happen on the ground. In New Zealand, we actually have one of the most politically centralised governments in the world. And here in Central Hawke's Bay, my rural district, it's a very small part of New Zealand, rurally based, farming based, so small towns and farming communities. In communities like mine, central government systems and services are dispersed. Sometimes they're not present in our community, sometimes they're run from other larger regional centres, and sometimes they're non-existent. So our strength as local government has been vital. And this was incredibly important as we very quickly moved into what we called a level 4 lockdown on the 25th of March 2020. And local government in New Zealand are the leaders and facilitators of civil defence, which is our response mechanism to emergency. And as leaders and coordinators, we had to move very quickly to provide reassuring voice to all parts of our community. And we did this, I'm proud to say, did this before many government agencies were able to articulate to people what help looked like. Local government translated that to the people in our communities. One of the very important ways of how we responded to COVID-19 to protect people and respond to people was through our networks. We focused on youth, elderly, Māori people, and the disabled in particular. We created a strong partnership with our local Māori leadership, and their culture is focused on what they call manaakitanga, the idea that we look after others before we look after ourselves to build their mana, which is their esteem. It was pivotal to looking after some of our most vulnerable communities. These networks were essential for supporting all parts of the community so that nobody was left behind. In New Zealand, we also have experienced other major emergencies such as earthquake, which has taught us a lot about how our society and different parts of communities respond and recover. We know that the Māori people and young people are overrepresented in our unemployment statistics. We also know that they were hardest hit by the major earthquake in Christchurch 10 years ago and were the least likely to recover fully. The pandemic has reiterated those existing vulnerabilities for Māori and youth who are most at risk from economic and social dislocation due to an emergency. As a result, Central Hawke's Bay District Council, my local government, has partnered with other agencies to provide approaches to economic and social recovery that target improving outcomes for these people. So we have investment initiatives around building infrastructure, improving civic spaces and gardens, and developing business. We have put progressive procurement policies in place to ensure that employment opportunities are filled, half of them to be filled by Māori people, and where appropriate, that young people are targeted as well. We have also used local initiatives to connect directly to our young people to help them regain their employment as we are now recovering from response to the pandemic. We've used local strengths and networks to ensure that we build that stronger community. And what this has done has shown that local government has clearly demonstrated a renewed capacity to support wellbeing across diverse local communities. And it really is an example on which future policy for local government could be shaped. Local mayors and local government officials know their communities very well. They know who are in them, they know who to talk to, they know how they operate. And it's very evident to us here that that is a strength that we will need as we recover and the shape of our societies change in the future as we move past COVID-19 pandemic. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mayor Walker. I can say kia ora koutou. That's the only New Zealand language I know. So thank you for comprehensive presentation. I think you highlighted very well that local governments know very well their own constituencies, their own communities. And your approach of participatory has been also highlighted clearly here, how important engagement of different stakeholders, especially in the vulnerable groups in this situation. So thank you, Mayor. Next speaker, we are very privileged to also have Mayor from Goyang City, Mr. Lee Jae-jun. Welcome, Mayor Lee. Also to, if you also recall that Goyang has joined UCLG-CISDP recently. So we welcome you, Mayor. And you will be also sharing the initiative of Goyang in responding to this COVID and highlighting the importance of human rights approach in your presentation. And you will also be focusing on the people-centered development, and of course in the post-coronavirus era. So Mayor, time is yours, please.
예, 반갑습니다. 대한민국 고양시장 이재주입니다. 올해는 대한민국 5.18 민주화운동 40주년입니다. 갑작스럽게 찾아온 세 번째 팬데믹 사태로 세계 곳곳에서 인권을 비롯한 기본적인 가치들이 흔들리고 그 존립마저 위협받고 있습니다. 40년 전 대한민국 광주에 울려 퍼진 총성은 인권의 신호탄이 되었습니다. 오늘날 총성도 없이 100만 명 가까이 바이러스와의 전쟁은 또 다른 인권의 문제점에 눈을 뜨게 했습니다. 코로나19는 전혀 새로운 인권의 위기를 불러온 것이 아니라 그동안 은폐되거나 묵과되어 온 인권 이야기를 수면 위로 드러낸 것이라고 생각합니다. 코로나19는 우리 사회의 가장 취약한 고리, 가장 골마있던 상처를 극명하게 드러냈습니다. 사회적 약자들은 동일한 타격에도 더 큰 고통을 겪었습니다. 영세한 소상공인은 폐업의 위기로 독거노인과 저소득층 등 취약계층은 돌봄의 사각지대로 몰렸습니다. 특정 지역과 소수자, 외국인 등에 대한 정체 없는 혐오가 이어졌습니다. 코로나19가 낳은 근본적인 원인은 성장의 불균형입니다. 그동안 우리는 양적 팽창에 집중해 왔습니다. 끝없는 성장의 과정에서 촉발된 기후변화는 생태계의 교란을 가져왔습니다. 성장의 혜택은 권력층에게, 보이지 않는 사회적 비용은 약자와 다음 세대에게 끝없이 전가되어 왔습니다. 그리고 이 바이러스의 고통은 사회적 약자에게 가중되며 양극화를 더욱 심화시켰습니다. 단순히 백신을 개발하는 것만으로 코로나19 후유증을 극복할 수 없습니다. 물론 백신은 바이러스로 인한 인명피해와 경제적 비용의 손실을 회복할 수 있겠지만 물리적 치유만으로 코로나19를 완전히 종식될 수 없습니다. 사회적 회복력을 지금부터 키워내야 합니다. 사회적 회복이란 코로나19 이전의 상태로 돌아가는 것이 아닙니다. 사람과 사람, 사람과 자연 사이의 불합리한 관계를 전면적으로 재설정함으로써 사람 중심의 새로운 도시로 나아가는 것입니다. 인간의 존엄성과 최소한의 기본권이 곳곳에서 녹아있는 도시, 이것이 포스트 코로나 시대의 과제이며 진정한 뉴노멀입니다. 인권은 그 자체로 일상입니다. 직장이나 계약관계의 갑질, 폭력, 차별, 모든 일상에서 일은 인권입니다. 때문에 인권은 국가의 거창한 이슈라기보다는 지방정부의 이슈에 더 가깝습니다. 위기 속에서 이러한 지자체의 역할은 더 명확하게 드러났습니다. 지방정부의 선제적 대응은 코로나19로 인한 사회적, 경제적 충격을 완화하는 중요한 변수가 되었습니다. 아이디어와 실행력을 모두 갖춘 지방정부는 그 진가를 여실히 드러냈습니다. 초유 위기를 촉매로 중앙정부와 지방정부의 관계는 통제와 지시가 아닌 수평적 협력 관계로 변모했습니다. 정부의 방역 지침에 따라 생활 속에서 시민에게 와닿는 실행 아이디어를 배출했고, 이 작은 정부들이 만들어낸 작은 혁신은 거대한 파동이 되어 중앙정부로 다시금 파급되고 수차례 고비를 넘는 원동력이 됐습니다. 공공과 공공, 공공과 민관, 도시와 도시 간 수평적인 협력 역시 이 방역망을 더욱 견고하게 했습니다. 다양한 형태의 참여를 허용하는 개방적 분위기 속에서 의료인은 헌신으로, 시민들은 사회적 거리두기와 마스크 쓰기, 손 씻기 등으로 자발적으로 동참했습니다. 민관은 물품과 인력뿐 아니라 아이디어를 나누며 거버넌스 대응 시스템을 갖췄습니다. 이렇듯 행정의 효율성보다는 투명성, 책임성, 민주성에 초점을 둔 결과 결과적으로 가장 효율적인 대응 전략이 마련됐습니다. 특히 고양시 긴밀한 민관 협력 거버넌스 운영은 위기를 극복하는 모범 사례로 주목받았습니다. 고양시는 2013년 조례 제정으로 인권 정책의 토대를 마련했고, 2015년 1차 인권 기본 계획을 수립한 데 이어 2차 계획을 수립 중에 있습니다. 내년에는 고양시 행정 전반에 인권 침해 요소가 없는지를 평가하는 인권 영향평가 제도를 도입할 예정입니다. 또한 작년에는 모든 직제 중에서 가장 우선에 인권과 평화 정책을 전담하는 부서를 만들어 인권위원회와 함께 컨트롤 타워 역할을 하고 있습니다. 고양시 이러한 사람 중심, 참여 중심의 조직은 코로나19 사태에서도 마찬가지로 중요한 역할을 했습니다. 고양시 첫 확진자 발생 이후 대내적으로는 재난안전본부를, 대외적으로는 의료인과 함께 참여하는 민관 의료협의체를 가장 빠르게 구성해 견고한 투트랙 조직을 만들었습니다. 또한 기업인, 소상공인, 종교인, 교육계 등 각계 각층이 참여하는 간담회를 수시로 개최함으로써 수평적 참여 발판도 만들어 두었습니다. 고향 안심카 선별 진료소는 이러한 참여가 만들어낸 대표적인 정책입니다. 신천지 집단 감염으로 코로나19 검사 건수가 4배로 폭증하며 보다 빠르고 안전한 검사 방식의 필요성이 대두되던 시점에서 고양시는 전국 지자체 최초로 드라이브스루 방식의 선별 진료소를 도입하게 됐습니다. 이 드라이브스루 방식은 의료진과 다른 방문객의 감염 위험을 낮추면서 검사 시간을 5분의 1로 줄여 안전성과 신속성의 2마리 토끼를 잡은 획기적인 선별 진료 방식이었습니다. 또한 문진, 검사, 검체 채취의 3단계 시스템을 최초로 체계화함으로써 정부의 승차진료소 표준 모델로 채택됐습니다. 또한 고양시는 법에 가로막혀 있던 화상진료 시스템을 전국 최초로 도입해 감염 위험을 최소화했습니다. 코로나19로 가장 큰 충격을 받은 소상공인과 농업인도 선제적으로 지원했습니다. 고양시 산업구조에서 자영업은 큰 비중을 차지합니다. 코로나19 확산 이후 전국 최초로 음식점, 카페에 대한 5기 영업을 허용해 밀집도를 낮추면서 매출 회복에도 도움을 주었습니다. 또한 사회적 거리두기 격상에 따라 영업이 중단된 고위험 시설 업소에 특별 휴업 지원금을 지급했습니다. 농업인과 소상공인 수도요금을 50% 감면하는 한편 전 시민에게 위기극복 지원금을 지급하고 정부의 재난지원금을 100% 지급해 지역 소비를 활성화했습니다. 고양시를 비롯한 지자체의 혁신적 대응 방식은 사유는 국제적으로, 실천은 지역적으로라는 대응 기준을 정립하는 계기가 됐습니다. 현장에서 발견된 문제점은 아직 지방정부의 권한과 재정이 절대적으로 부족하다는 것입니다. 긴급한 상황에서 지역 실정에 맞는 유연한 대응을 하기에는 어려움이 있습니다. 중앙과 지방 간 효율적인 역할 분담이 체계화되지 않았고 위기에 따른 관행은 여전히 남아 있습니다. 앞으로 자치분권을 제도적으로 확대함으로써 지자체에게 더 많은 자율성을 보장해야 합니다. 이는 궁극적으로 시민의 주체적 참여를 보장할 수 있는 길이며 모두의 존엄성을 보장할 수 있는 길입니다. 포스트 코로나 시대에 인간 존엄성 실현을 위한 사회적 회복력을 키우고 사람 중심의 도시로 나아가는 것이 고양시를 포함한 지방정부에게 주어진 가장 중요한 과제입니다. 이는 사람답게 살 수 있는 국가의 의무, 사회의 책임, 개인의 사명이 어우러질 때 가능합니다. 그 해답은 사회의 거버넌스 간 협력과 연대라고 생각합니다. 오늘 이 자리가 포용과 회복의 인권도시로 나아가기 위한 연대와 협력의 촉매가 되기를 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
Kamsahamnida. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for excellent speech, Mayor Lee. You highlighted very well that concerns of local governments, which is decentralization. I think lack of finance you have mentioned. But I'm very, very pleased of having your commitment in promoting human rights in Goyang City, looking at also the importance of good governance, transparency, accountability, and also other aspects of humanity, which is climate change. So thank you once again, Mayor Lee. I would like now to invite the next speakers. I just learned that Mayor Philippe Rio from Green France, he got affected by COVID-19. We feel very sorry to hear the news. So he's not able to join us. Let's pray for his quick recovery and hopefully he can be active again and get recovered very soon. So next, I'd like to invite UNESCO Regional Advisor for Social and Human Sciences in ASPAC, Ms. Sue Weiss. She's based in Bangkok. So please, time is yours. You're given 7 minutes for the overview presentation, please.
Thank you, Bernadilla, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everybody, especially our local government representatives from around the world. I think the message from that Bernadilla has just conveyed shows just directly how local governments are not only coping with the pandemic and doing all of the things that we've just heard about, but they themselves are individually some of the people who are impacted and their families. So they're dealing with this both on the personal front and in terms of how they actually respond to support their communities. So I'd like to echo Bernadilla's thoughts for Mayor Rio. I'd like to pick up on a couple of the threads that people have mentioned. And the first one that's particularly at my heart is the way that local governments work with community, and particularly the mentions about young people. UNESCO, as well as our programs with local government that Ms. Ramos has mentioned, does a lot of work on youth programs. And one of the things that we've been trying to do during this pandemic is to work with young people to engage them in being respondents and actively taking part in this, and not just feeling like victims or not just being blamed as people that are not taking this seriously. And we've actually been really overwhelmed and surprised at the response from young people. We put out a call for young people that want to be involved in a project about and we have to this is kind of
Hello, Sue, we cannot hear you well. Maybe you can switch off your video. We got a little, internet connection from your side. Maybe in order to have a better connection, you can switch off the video. Maybe that can be better. Yes, please.
Okay, so I think this unprecedented response from young people shows that this pandemic is just incredibly different from anything that we have experienced before. And I think that we're really trying our hardest to engage them. I'd also really like to pick up on the point about local government being the possible or best interface with a lot of socially disadvantaged groups. Although it's often higher level government that is setting policies in relation to these groups, it's the direct participation, support and services provided at the local government level that are really in a position to promote well-being. And I think Mayor Alex actually mentioned this very well. What we're all aiming for out of this is the well-being of people across the world, and everybody doing what they can to address this. And local government, of course, not only knows those who are the socially disadvantaged, but can actually be there on the ground. And I think the example of a rural community that is distant from a lot of services really highlights the fact that local government is there when other government levels of government are further away. Also, I think the point from Korea about having a way to assess what local government is doing in terms of impact is really important. And the fact that local governments are thinking about how they can determine the success of what they're doing, how they can actually then improve their programs in the future is also quite critically important. And I think that this really shows the way that local government is coming at this from multiple directions and coping with all of these things at the same time. And I think that we had these were excellent examples, and it's just a shame that we couldn't also hear from France, because France, in fact, has had such a huge impact in the country. So it would be very interesting, and I hope we can find out more from France as we move forward through these couple of days. And again, I think that I would just like to reiterate finally the point about partnership. Ms. Ramos mentioned the fact that the partnership is really important, the partnerships of local governments with each other, the partnerships of local government with higher levels of government, but also the way that participatory mechanisms are being introduced in local governments now, more and more. This is going to be what's going to improve the ability of local governments to be able to deliver the best quality and most accessible services to the communities. And I think that the pandemic has actually pushed us into developing these partnerships, possibly at a faster rate than we were doing before, through simple necessity. I guess it's a good practice that is essential to how we move forward, because the way things are looking, we'll still be here in 4 or 5 months' time. We're going to be dealing with the same issue. Just to finish, the mentioned that there's no kind of getting a vaccine is still not going to save from happening, because we're going to be dealing with the legacy of this for many months to come through the social and economic impact that was also mentioned. So I think that as we work together with local government, between local government and the others, we need to actually take this longer term perspective on building the partnerships and how we can make the most out of this as we continue to move forward. So looking forward to hearing the rest of the speakers today. And I just like to leave you with those few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very good observation. Thank you, Sue. Let me now move to our next speaker, Deputy Mayor for Administrative Affairs of Gwangju Metropolitan City, Deputy Mayor Kim Jong-yu. Deputy Mayor, again, thank you very much for promoting and expanding human rights cities, not only in Korea but throughout the world through your city active participation in UCLG as well as UCLG ASPAC. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And also we are commemorating this 40 years anniversary of the uprising movement. So Mayor, time is yours. You are given 8 minutes, please.
안녕하십니까. 광주 행정부시장 김종효입니다. 먼저 포스트 코로나 시대에 지방정부의 미래를 함께 설계하기 위해서 세계인권도시포럼에 참여해 주신 여러분께 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 지금 세계적인 코로나19 대확산으로 많은 도시들이 방역 물품과 의료 인력, 병실 등이 부족하여 의료 체계가 붕괴될 위험에 처해 있습니다. 그리고 경제, 교육, 문화 등 사회 전반에 걸쳐 위기가 확산되고 있습니다. 그동안 드러나지 않았던 도시들의 취약한 부분이 코로나19를 계기로 나타나고 있습니다. 이런 어려움 속에서 인권 문제도 사회 곳곳에서 발생을 하고 있습니다. 시민들의 건강권을 지키기 위한 철저한 방역 활동이 역설적이게도 시민의 자유와 경제, 문화적 권리 등을 제약하기도 합니다. 정부 당국은 코로나19가 급격히 확산되자 확진자의 동선을 공개하고 방문 시설에 대해서 폐쇄 조치를 취했습니다. 그리고 확진자와 접촉한 사람들은 2주간 자가격리를 하고 모든 해외 입국자에 대해서도 2주간의 격리가 이루어지고 있습니다. 이로 인해서 사생활 공개 등에 따른 프라이버시 침해와 시설 폐쇄에 따른 경제활동 제한, 그리고 자가격리로 인한 이동 자유 제한 등 많은 기본권 제한에 대한 이의 제기도 있었습니다. 그러나 대한민국 정부는 국민들의 건강과 국가의 안전과 안정을 위해서 신속하고 철저한 방역을 실시하였고 코로나19 확진자 동선 공개 가이드라인을 만들어서 인권 보호에도 최선을 다하고 있습니다. 그리고 경제적으로 어려움에 처한 모든 국민이 기본적인 삶을 유지할 수 있도록 재난지원금을 신속하게 지급하는 등 후속 조치도 이루어지고 있습니다. 중앙정부의 노력과 함께 광주시는 민주, 인권, 평화의 의미를 담은 5.18 광주 정신으로 코로나19에 체계적으로 대응하고 있습니다. 첫째는 민주적이고 투명한 대응입니다. 광주시는 공무원으로 구성된 재난안전대책본부와 지역 의료기관과 단체가 참여하는 민간 공동대책위원회를 출범시켰습니다. 모든 정보를 공유하고 코로나19 대책을 함께 논의하여 합리적으로 결정해 나가고 있습니다. 그리고 감염 검사를 신속하게 실시하고 감염자의 통계와 이동 동선을 시민에게 즉시 공개하여 추가 감염의 위험을 최소화하고 있습니다. 또 해외 입국자에 대해서는 생활치료센터에 격리해서 감염 검사를 신속하게 실시하고 있습니다. 아울러 자가격리자 안전보호 앱을 통해서 자가격리 이탈 여부를 모니터링하고 있습니다. 물론 인권을 보호하기 위하여 확진자를 특정할 수 있는 정보는 공개를 하고 있지 않습니다. 둘째는 소외계층에 대한 인권적 대응입니다. 사회 경제적으로 취약한 사람들이 재난의 고통을 훨씬 더 크게 겪고 있습니다. 광주시는 9차례에 걸쳐서 코로나19 피해 지원 대책을 세워서 시행을 하고 있습니다. 저소득층과 특수고용직, 실직자 등에게 긴급 생계비를 지원하고 있습니다. 소상공인 및 중소기업에는 무이자 또는 낮은 금리로 경영자금을 빌려주고 있으며 대중교통 및 상하수도 요금 등 총 9개의 공공요금을 동결 조치하였습니다. 또 문화예술인과 실직자, 고등학생과 대학생 등에게 맞춤형 재난지원금을 지급하였습니다. 외국인 근로자 등 취약계층에게는 마스크를 무료로 제공함으로써 감염병을 극복하면서 안정된 삶을 살아갈 수 있도록 지원하고 있습니다. 또한 시민사회에서는 수십억 원에 달하는 기부금을 모아서 소외계층에게 지원하였고 건물주들은 소상공인들의 임대료를 낮춰주는 착한 임대인 운동을 펼치고 있습니다. 격리자 및 일반 시민들의 불안, 우울과 스트레스 등 심리적 문제를 해결하기 위해서 코로나19 심리지원단을 운영 중이며 완치자에게는 신체, 정신적 후유증을 치유하기 위해 코로나19 온라인 후유증 극복센터도 운영을 하고 있습니다. 셋째는 나눔과 연대의 대응입니다. 광주시와 대구시 두 광역자치단체는 2009년에 달빛 동맹을 맺었습니다. 광주는 코로나19로 큰 위기를 맞은 대구에 제일 먼저 광주의 병실과 의료진을 제공해 병상연대라는 새로운 지역 공동체 협력 모델을 만들었습니다. 최근 광주의 확진자가 급증할 때에는 반대로 대구에서 간호사 10명을 파견해와 의료 지원 활동을 펼쳤습니다. 광주시는 국내 병상연대는 물론 이웃나라 중국의 9개 자매 우호도시와도 방역 구호 물품을 상호 지원하였습니다. 최근에는 광주시 긴급 의료 지원단을 모집하였는데 시민 150여 명이 자발적으로 신청을 하였고 다른 지역의 도시에서도 30여 명이 지원을 했습니다. 또 광주 민주화운동 당시 시민들에게 주먹밥을 제공했던 광주의 어머니들이 이번에는 의료진을 위해 주먹밥 도시락을 만들어 주셨습니다. 이처럼 광주에는 수많은 연대의 손길이 이어지고 있습니다. 광주시는 코로나19 대응과 더불어 포스트 코로나 시대에 보다 효용적이고 회복력 있는 인권도시를 지향하기 위한 3가지 전략을 추진을 하고 있습니다. 첫째는 신종 감염병 대비 보건의료 인프라를 구축해 나가고 있습니다. 광주 공공의료원을 2024년에 개원해서 음압병상 40개와 일반 병상 210개를 확보하고 광주 주변 지역 주민들까지 진료받을 수 있는 호남권역 감염병 전문병원도 2023년에 개원할 계획입니다. 둘째는 2045년까지 탄소 중립 에너지 자립도시를 만들어갈 것입니다. 코로나19 대유행을 계기로 감염병이 기후변화와 밀접하게 관련되어 있다는 것이 밝혀졌고 앞으로도 기후위기가 시민의 건강과 생명을 위협할 것입니다. 이러한 미래의 위험에 대응하기 위해서 광주시는 전력 부분을 100% 신재생 에너지로 전환하여 시민 모두가 녹색 에너지를 생산하고 이용하는 녹색 전환 도시를 만들어 갈 것입니다. 그리고 3천만 그루 나무 심기와 도시공원 조성, 생활 폐기물 100% 자원화 등을 통해서 기후 안심 도시를 실현해 나갈 것입니다. 또한 청정 공기 산업과 환경 융합 산업을 육성하고 기후 환경 일자리를 창출해 나갈 것입니다. 이 모든 사업은 100여 개 시민사회 단체와 기업, 행정기관 등이 참여해서 이루어질 것입니다. 셋째는 인권도시 네트워크를 더욱 강화해 나가겠습니다. 2011년 세계 인권도시포럼이 시작된 이후 인권연대를 향한 노력이 활발해졌지만 상대적으로 인권연대를 통해 함께 해결해야 할 인권과제도 많아졌습니다. 인류가 직면한 다양한 위기를 극복하고 지속 가능한 인권 공동체를 만들기 위해서는 보다 강고한 실천적인 인권연대가 필요합니다. 광주시는 인권 관련 국제기구와 인권도시를 지향하는 지방정부, NGO 등과 함께 인권연대를 실행하는 데 최선을 다할 것입니다. 광주시는 10여 년 동안 인권도시 운동을 지속적으로 펼쳐왔고 그 경험이 쌓여 사회 전반적으로 포용적이며 인권 친화적인 문화를 형성해 나가고 있습니다. 오늘 회의에 참석하신 많은 도시 관계자분들과 끈끈한 인권연대를 구축해 나감으로써 지금의 어려운 시기를 함께 헤쳐나가길 희망합니다. 경청해 주셔서 감사합니다.
감사합니다. 감사합니다. Thank you very much for very good speech. Also sharing the initiatives that Gwangju has taken during this COVID situation, and also highlighted the importance of digitalizations. And you also share with us very good strategies, 3 strategies that also include this carbon neutral energy self-reliant city by 2045. I think that's very, very good news. And I'm very sure many cities are also looking forward to having further cooperation with Gwangju, especially and related to human rights cities. And your solidarity to support Daegu also has shown how humanism of the city of Gwangju, the people of Gwangju has in this situation. So thank you once again, Deputy Mayor, for excellent speech. Next, I just learned that there will be a representative of Mayor Gwangju. I mentioned that Mayor Rio is not able, but his representative, Ms. Nadia, is here, and she will deliver a message from Mayor Rio. So time is yours, Ms. Nadia.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. I am Nadia Nouira, collaborator of Philippe Rio, Mayor of Grigny, and co-president of the UCLG Committee on Social Inclusion, Participatory Democracy, and Human Rights. Unfortunately, he will not be able to attend this meeting for health reasons. I will therefore speak on his behalf. I want to thank you for the invitation to the edition 2020 of the Gwangju World Human Rights Cities Forum. I am honored to participate in this session, which celebrates the 40th anniversary of May 18th, the date of the democratic uprising in the metropolitan city of Gwangju, that we have assembled in Mayor Office, in order to recall the importance of defense and protection of human rights at the local level. The health crisis caused by COVID-19 has accelerated fragilities, vulnerabilities, and social inequalities around the world. From Vienna to Mexico, via Boston and Greenwich, the testimonies gathered by the UCLG are all unanimous on the social and economic consequences of the pandemic. Local authorities play a key role in meeting the needs of their inhabitants, coming to the aid of the most vulnerable, promoting the logic of solidarity and making the realities of their territories heard. The access to the basic rights, such as access to food, decent housing, and health, have been the most significant violation of human rights everywhere. The health crisis caused by the COVID-19 epidemic is hitting population in cities around the world, bringing with it a major social crisis. In order to respond, the local authorities have implemented social policies aimed at vulnerable people. Local authorities have promoted territorial solutions to play a decisive role for populations and local civil society. Food aid, access to the first aid, the conditions of decent housing, return to employment through professional integrations are all issues on which local authorities have been working for a long time, but which have taken on a new character with the crisis. Poverty undermines human dignity and basic human rights. Local public services are making rapid change to respond to multiple emergencies. They adopt a new organization and develop the skills of their agents. Local public services must demonstrate exceptional agility and responsiveness. Local governments who have developed human rights policies in recent years have knowledge, expertise, and institutional capacities that could be particularly relevant in dealing with the socio-economical impact of the COVID-19. In Vienna, expertise in human rights has enabled the city to provide response to vulnerable people such as children, the elderly, the homeless, and women. Since the lockdown began, City Council has worked to purchase 5,000 laptops to distribute to children whose family cannot afford homeschooling. Many cities such as Mexico City or Greenwich have carried out a precise census of the elderly and people with disabilities in order to have reliable data and allow to the implementation of solidarity actions such as the distribution of free masks, home delivery of meals, groceries, and medication to isolated and confined people in a situation of vulnerability and isolation in order to protect them against possible contagion and to reduce the effect of social isolation. In addition, many local authorities have put in place emergency responses to the housing issues that have arisen following the confinement measures. the risk of lasting housing crisis is worrying due to the massive loss of jobs and the disruption of formal and informal economic activity, which affect a majority of countries. Faced with this situation, local governments are trying to find solutions to protect the most vulnerable tenants and small owners. Barcelona, for instance, suspended the payment of rents for social housing for the months April, May, and June. In Australia, the regional government of Victoria announced the suspension of eviction from 6 months. The protection of migrants has also emerged as an important issue for local cities in this time of pandemic. Communicating on the crisis and health measures, ensuring access to health and food for all, coordinating actions at local level with associations, and bring up the urgency of the situations of migrants at different levels of the state. In this regard, many cities have implemented solutions. The city of Sfax in Tunisia offers migrants food packages and access to healthcare. The city of Grenoble in France, Al Hoceima and Rabat in Morocco have provided emergency accommodation to migrants, in particular through agreement with hotels or public structure to guarantee containment measures in the most dignified condition possible. More than ever, human rights values can help to build bridges between institutions and citizens to build inclusive societies. They can help find solutions to the socio-economic consequences of the crisis, which has highlighted the essential value of public services. Despite the action put in place by local governments, there is an acceleration in social vulnerabilities. There are about 1 million poor people in France and a 30% increase in food aid. We can speak of social violence and human indignity. The worst is in front of us, and the signals are alarming. Unpaid bills and rents are piling up, food emergency for families sinking into precariousness, difficulty of finding a job. States and their governments must absolutely rely on local government to succeed together in meeting the human challenges facing us. States must trust and give local governments, which are on the front line, the means to face up to the social crisis. They are the ones who will find the solution best suits to their situation. In France, as in many countries, massive interventions plans are proposed, but they too often forget the social emergency. We must not put emergency in competition, but on contrary, we must define complementary policies. Cities must imperatively demand that national governments and international organizations take into account the emergencies of proximity and everyday life in our neighborhoods, so that the social economic fractures do not increase and do not harm the living together of our cities. Thank you for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, Nadia. You mentioned several keywords that I took note here about the importance of housing, and you also mentioned the importance of protecting the migrants and support the migrants. I think that's very important points that we hear from you. And I also agree with you, state government must trust local governments and must give authority to local governments. Thank you once again. And please convey our best wishes to Mayor Rio for his quick recovery. Thank you once again. So next speaker, I would like to invite Mayor of Bergan City of Nepal. I understand that we will hear his video message, but I learned also that he will join us during this discussion session. So let's hear his video message.
Coordinator, UCLG, General Secretary, UCLG-ASPAC, Assistant Director, General UNESCO, mayors, human rights activists and professionals, government officials, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste. Please do accept my warm greetings. It is a pleasure to speak today at this forum. I would like to thank UCLG-ASPAC and the organizations of 10th World Human Rights Cities Forum for this opportunity to share my view and experience as a mayor of a local government in Nepal. The theme of this session is very relevant in today's scenario. I will be presenting my views on local governments and COVID-19 Bergan's experience. I will be speaking mainly about the roles of local government during the current crisis of COVID pandemic, which has affected us all. I will share my experience both as a local government in general and during the pandemic in particular. I will try to outline the major challenges we faced, actions we could take or couldn't take, lessons learned, and way forward. So COVID-19 has brought an extraordinary challenge to the humanity. It has adversely impacted the people in a manner never experienced before. Having impacted every aspect of public life, it has brought our planet to a grinding halt. More than new human rights challenges, the pandemic has deepened and worsened the pre-existing human rights problems, particularly for the most vulnerable. COVID started as a health emergency, but has quickly got into the social and economic sphere as well. Nepal is not exception, our city is no exception. Before I get into my topic, I would like to speak about some background information. Nepal has always been a unitary state. Political instability, violence, conflicts, and insurgency has been perpetual. With the new constitution, Nepal became a federal republic. The transition from a unitary state to a federal structure with 3 tiers of government, central, provincial, and local government, is very recent in context of Nepal. There are now 7 province and 753 local levels. After a vacuum of about 2 decades, local government took place in end of 2017. The 3 tiers of government are still adjusting to the new structure. Necessary laws and institutions are not in place, and hence regular conflict between the central, provincial, and the local government arises. Decentralization hasn't happened in later and spring. In local level elections, many new faces with no experience have been elected in a large number. We all are struggling to understand our roles, relevant laws, policy, etc. With the decentralization, proper capacity building hasn't taken place. Adjustment of public service officers and employees was much delayed, and many of the local government lacked required human resources for long time. It impacted our service delivery and overall functioning. Another major challenge is lack of adequate economic resource, and it's disbursable from the central government. With the enough support from the central government and inadequate internal revenue at the local levels, wide and desired development hasn't kicked off. Nevertheless, everyone has now realized the importance of a strong and empowered local government. People now have high expectation from local government. In our limited experience, we have understood the tremendous impact of an empowered local level which closely works with the citizen. General public now feel the ownership as function of local government is now increasingly participated. Through close proximity and assess, citizens can participate in the planning process and pose questions to the elected members and officials. It wasn't this easy earlier. Public services are now designed and delivered as per the local need and desire. People now feel that they can have their say. Citizens want to actively participate in each and every sphere of local decision making, and that's really encouraging. Nothing about us without us. It is general understanding now. The new constitution has ensured that women and minorities get educated representation in governments, and that has changed the political landscape. It's heartening to see people from different backgrounds and identity working together for a better society. Nepal has rich linguistic and caste diversity, and in the changed context, everyone has got greater share and representation than the past. If is now gradually becoming a level playing field. At least we are on right direction now. Slowly and steadily, we will reach the destination, and destination is a just and progressive society where human life has a dignity. A society that respects and protects human rights. A society with freedom and non-discrimination. A society that functions according to the rule of law. So we have laid a good foundation, and now we have to keep moving in the right direction. Special attention has to be given in uprooting the old and discriminatory practice. We have to continuously strive for an inclusive society and discouraging the environment which makes our citizens in exclusion. More focused and affordable education and health services is need of the hour. I would now like to bring your attention to the Bergan metropolitan city. It is the youngest of the 6 metropolises in Nepal, situated in the plain land, the Tarai Madhes. It is a southern city which shares border to the India. Madhesis are the main indigenous population in this region. We have a population of about 400,000. Nationwide, lockdown was imposed in the month of March 2020 with few reported cases of COVID. Gradually, the case skyrocketed. COVID cases started being reported in our city too. Having an open border with India added to the numbers, as India already had more reported cases. Initially, there were very less scientific information and understanding about COVID-19, which generated an environment of threat and panic. With very limited knowledge about the disease and limited resources at hand, we are not much prepared to deal with it in an effective manner. Ever-rising cases in the rich and mightiest countries of the world scared us. Nevertheless, we plan to deal with it in best possible manner. To date, we have faced many unique challenges and learned quite a few new experiences in this journey so far. In the pandemic scenario, we did what a local government has to do, and also what central and provincial governments could not do immediately. We had to respond in a timely and proactive manner. Apart from providing immediate relief to the poor and daily wage laborers in the unorganized sector, we also established quarantine centers, COVID special hospitals, mass PCR testing, pre-isolation centers, etc. We followed the 3T principle: trace, test, and treat. We launched an ambitious program, One Home, One PCR, to test at least one member from each household, a first of its kind in Nepal. It encouraged other local level bodies to start more testing and pressurized the central government to increase the testing rate. We did the wider consultation with elected representatives, civil society, security apparatus, rights group, and experts lobbying to generate support from industrialists, other organizations, public for effective management was done. The major challenge we faced during the pandemic are lack of coordination among the federal structure, scarcity of resources, limited know-how about the disease, restricted access to essential public services by the people, institutions becoming authoritarian and insensitive towards people, intentional and unwarranted restriction of human rights, pandemic as an excuse to violate human rights, ad hoc decision-making, etc. On the positive side, we have learned quite a few lessons and got an opportunity to improve our shortcomings. I would like to talk about a few important lessons learned during the pandemic. We realized that establishing and maintaining infectious disease hospitals, shelters, community centers, resourceful and all well-equipped disaster management department and health department as crucial. Importance of early preparedness, right-based approach, periodic capacity building for elected representative and employee, especially concerning disaster management and protection of human rights, collaborating and coordination with institutions and organizations were strongly felt. It was a moment for us to ponder about the gaps in our functioning, work style, knowledge, and technical know-how. This has forced us to reflect and change the course. It has made our belief firm that a strong and empowered local government is the only way. So what's the way forward? A strong and empowered local governments, rights-based approach, localization of SDGs and HR, capacity building, mutual learning, sharing and cooperation, activism and lobbying, gender, mainstreaming, ensuring constitutionally guaranteed rights to health and educate health care facilities, educate housing, sanitation, water supply, etc. A holistic approach that leaves to no one behind must be our guiding principle. Thank you for your patiently listening to me, and I will be happy to get your questions more to clear my whatever I have presented over here.
Thank you very much, Mayor Vijay. Thank you very much. I took note some key points you mentioned, some challenges you also highlighted. Indeed, we need a very strong and empowered local governments. And you also mentioned the importance of localization of SDGs. This is a fundamental or principle of sustainable development. You also highlighted the importance of having right-based approach in the development and local development. You also mentioned the issue of migrations, especially since Bergan is the border between India and Nepal. So thank you once again. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions addressed to you, Mayor. So next, I would like to invite UN Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing, Mr. Balakrishnan Rajagopal. He has a video presentation. So please, we can see his video message.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable mayors, I would like to thank the World Human Rights City Forum for inviting me to speak at this plenary session. Over the past 10 years, this forum has successfully offered a platform for local governments to exchange experiences and to strive for making human rights a reality for all in our cities and communities. The right to adequate housing enshrined in the International Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights is one of those rights. Housing is an essential frontline defense in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Stay-at-home orders underline how important access to adequate housing is to protect people and their communities from COVID-19. Physical distancing has been a key element in fighting the virus, but over 1.8 billion people across the world are currently living in inadequate and overcrowded housing conditions. And where will several 100 million people living in homelessness stay and how can they be safe? For many, housing has indeed emerged as a matter of life and death. However, before the pandemic, there were already other pandemics, a pandemic of forced evictions, homelessness, substandard housing, housing overcrowding, and other violations of the right to adequate housing. There has also been a pandemic of housing speculation with skyrocketing housing prices, making housing increasingly unaffordable for many, not only for the poor. When states adopted the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, they vowed to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable by 2030. With only 10 years left, COVID-19 has exposed the fractures in the fabric of our cities and societies and made it very challenging to achieve these goals unless we search for out-of-the-box solutions. As I conclude in my forthcoming report to the UN General Assembly on COVID-19 and the right to adequate housing, what we can currently observe are the following. First, the impact of COVID-19 on the right to adequate housing has been very unequally distributed, reflecting pre-existing hierarchies and inequalities along racial, gender, and other lines. Mortality and infection rates are significantly higher among minorities and other vulnerable groups. Inadequate housing conditions for millions of marginalized people have contributed to excessive, largely preventable death and suffering. Second, while the pandemic continues to rage, many temporary housing mitigation measures have either already come to an end or may soon do so. An unprecedented spike in evictions, hunger, homelessness, and eventually mortality is therefore to be expected. Third, forced evictions have continued, if not accelerated, during the pandemic. Homeless persons, persons who live in informal settlements, migrant workers, and many other vulnerable groups are now facing worsening conditions with heightened risk of infection, community spread of the virus, and mortality. I believe these outcomes can and should be avoided, and that a better approach to combating the worst impacts of COVID-19 on the right to adequate housing is available and possible, and that local governments can play a key role in this respect. Many local governments have tried to bring housing as a human right and as a social public good. More than 35 cities have endorsed the Municipalist Declaration of Local Governments for the Right to Housing and the Right to the City, including Amsterdam, Barcelona, Berlin, Buenos Aires, Copenhagen, Geneva, Jakarta, Lisbon, London, Mexico City, Montreal, Montevideo, New York, Seoul, Taipei, and Vienna. Similarly, the Gwangju guiding principles for a human rights city have recognized that all levels of governments, national, regional, or local, have an obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill all human rights in their own mandates and competence, including the right to adequate housing, and endorsed a human rights approach to urban governance. But the pandemic has made it obvious that too many states, but as well as public authorities at local level, have treated the right to adequate housing as a nice aspirational goal, but not always as a human right that must be realized on the ground. It is a sad fact that it took a pandemic to push many states and local governments to adopt more courageous measures by banning evictions temporarily, by offering relief to mortgage payers, prohibiting rent increases, or providing housing for people experiencing homelessness in empty buildings, hotels, hostels in our cities. Many of these measures were seen as politically difficult, if not impossible, before the pandemic. In many cities, things were suddenly possible for which civil society organizations asked for many years to provide water and sanitation facilities for informal settlements, to end street homelessness, to make serious efforts to prevent any evictions. What it shows is that if there is a political will, governments can indeed tackle these challenges. Unfortunately, many of these measures are temporary in nature and in many countries have already come to an end. Neither COVID-19 nor its assault on the right to adequate housing will soon be over if local and national governments fail to take urgent action to prevent what is looming as temporary measures expire, a tsunami of evictions. The right to adequate housing must be central to any COVID-19 response and recovery measures at a local level. Let me conclude with some recommendations about what regional local governments can actually do. 1. Local governments should install local bans on evictions and foreclosures for the duration of the pandemic and build on those measures for a human rights compliant housing policy during the post-pandemic recovery phase, which is adequately funded. 2, local governments should ensure that the response and recovery measures are not discriminatory and leave no one behind, including those who are discriminated against on the basis of their gender, race, ethnicity, nationality, or socioeconomic status, or on other grounds. Groups who have been subjected to systemic and historic discrimination and marginalization must benefit from the response and recovery measures. 3, local governments should house people experiencing homelessness, whatever accommodation they can find in hotels, motels, second homes, or other vacant housing for the duration of the crisis, and make plans to move people to permanent housing rather than back onto the streets. Homelessness should be tackled through a sharp increase in the appropriation of funding for temporary housing and for the purchase or expropriation of empty or vacant property for permanent housing. 4, local or regional governments could enact rent caps and subsidies for tenants and small-scale landlords consistent with their needs and to ensure stability in the housing market during the pandemic so that a global health emergency does not become an eviction and housing emergency. 5, local and regional governments should constrain the role of private equity firms as landlords and improve the rights and protections of tenants and renters. This should include regulation of big corporate landlords and legislation and government or judicial mechanisms protecting the rights of tenants. By taking such steps now, we can not only mitigate the threats caused by the pandemic on the right to housing, but will also be able to ensure that in our cities, the right to housing is realized for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we took note of 5 recommendations from UN Special Rapporteur on Adequate Housing that include also banning eviction during this pandemic and provide accommodation or homes to homeless. So thank you very much. Now I would like to hear comments or intervention from Ms. Rebecca Malay. She is a chairperson of the board at the Global Call to Actions Against Poverty in the Philippines. Because we run out of time, I really appreciate if you can speak less than 7 minutes. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everybody. My name is Becky Malay. I work as the chairperson of the board of the Global Call to Action Against Poverty. It's a global campaigning organization that has been working on the issues of poverty and inequality. So we're focusing really on campaigns at the global level. We are 58 national coalitions in Latin America, Asia, Africa, and Europe, and Africa. I just want to share my comments, my thoughts on this. First, congratulations to the World Human Rights Cities Forum for organizing this very important forum. I think it's high time that we really adopt the framework of SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and human rights together. It is very important because based on what is happening right now, we have been upended by the pandemic. COVID-19 has really exposed a lot of the inequalities all over the world in terms of income, in terms of opportunities, in terms of impacts. No? So these are 3 facets of inequality that has really impacted very negatively and mostly on women. So gender inequality is really very important as a goal to be pursued. No? So I'm looking at human rights. The principles of human rights have been adequately discussed that need to be taken consideration of. We must really build our response to COVID, and local governments and even national governments for that matter should really build on mechanisms for accountability, people's participation, and non-discrimination. It is very essential to take all of these things together because it will strengthen the trust of the people on the government, right? And the legitimacy of the government is actually bolstered if there is accountability, participation, and non-discrimination. And of course, you must use the recommendations already per country given by the Human Rights Commission the fulfillment of the rights, because there are several recommendations in the many resolutions contained in the OHCHR sessions. No, and my idea really focuses on how inequality should be addressed, and I think it's important for all of us, especially for local governments, to really look at the data that they have in terms of the number of poor people in their localities. Because if you focus on the poorest of the poor, you will be able to see how much or how many of the poorest of the poor are actually falling deeper into poverty. And those who have not been poor in the first place have lost their jobs and therefore are falling into the cracks. No? So the answer to this really is really inclusiveness in terms of social protection. We should have adequate social protection, not as an emergency response, but a set of permanent entitlements, no? And we should guarantee the access through independent claims mechanisms when there are people who are left behind in terms of the distribution of social protection measures that are instituted at emergency responses. Generally, I think social protection should be multifaceted, responsive to the multifaceted realities of people living in poverty. It should guarantee continuity in the coverage, and it should have an adequate amount, no? So people can live with dignity. And then social protection should also be attentive to diverse realities of the informal workers. Many of the workers all over the world are informal workers, so people who have lost their jobs that are formally employed are already suffering. How much more the informal workers? So,
thank you. Could you conclude, please?
Yes, I just want to say also that we have to be attentive to the diverse realities of migrants and undocumented workers. There are a number of migrants and undocumented workers, indigenous peoples, and women and children. And social protection must also take care of people who do not have adequate digital financial inclusion mechanisms. No? In terms of the distribution, when you use the digital platforms, take care of the digital divide, because people might not be able to access more because they don't have the means. No? And of course, the reiteration of all the human rights principles, not only of economic, social, and cultural rights, but more so of civil and political rights, which should be guaranteed. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's very clear. You also mentioned the importance of data. This is definitely important, and data synchronization also is the key, especially at the local level. Very difficult to find the good data. I think this is a good point. And you also mentioned the importance of social protection and how we can address inequality. So thank you very much, Rebecca, for excellent intervention. Next, I would like to invite a speaker from Mayor's Office for External Affairs, Mr. Tom Cho from Taipei. I think he has a video message. Can we hear his message, please?
Greetings to our hosts, distinguished guests, and audience. I'm Tom Cho, Commissioner of Taipei City Government for External Affairs. Due to the impact of COVID-19, we are unable to meet in person. However, we are still able to communicate through video conference, thanks to the advancement of technology. Human Rights Day reminds us that there are ongoing human rights issues in our communities and the world. It relies our efforts to ensure that human rights are implemented throughout the world, said Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of the United Nations. I would like to share with you what Taipei City has done in protecting human rights this year. Starting from early this year, COVID-19 has spread rapidly around the world. Beyond being a global health and economic crisis felt across the world, COVID-19 has also posed a serious threat to human rights in unimaginable ways. As of October 2nd, 2020, the total number of confirmed cases has exceeded 34 million, and the global death toll has surpassed 1 million people. To contain the continued spread of the virus, many countries have decided to close their borders and implement lockdown measures, limiting unnecessary outings and stripping citizens of their mobility. This has led to a devastating impact on the economy. According to IMF, the global economic growth this year will be -3%, worse than that of Great Depression of the 1930s. It seems that the governments have to choose between people's health and the economy while managing the crisis. Unfortunately, in the process, we are witnessing large-scale human rights incidents. For example, security forces of some African nations use violence as a method to deter vendors from operation during lockdown. Doctors in some Western countries face a difficult decision on whether they should remove respirators from elderly and provide it to younger patients with a higher chance of survival. Taipei City, the capital of Taiwan, is committed to providing assistance during this crisis. According to research from Oxford University, Taiwan is one of the several countries that clearly disproves the argument that government must choose between protecting people's health and protecting the economy in their response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The study found that in the second quarters of 2020, Taiwan was the least impacted, only has 570 confirmed cases and 7 deaths as of 2nd of October, with a decline of only 0.6% in economic growth, followed by South Korea's fall of 3% and Lithuania's 3.7%. By contrast, Spain and United Kingdom and Tunisia all experienced declines of more than 20%. The key reason for Taipei's success in managing both the pandemic and the economy is its comprehensive set of strategies in disease prevention. The 5 epidemic prevention strategies are strict internal control, advanced deployment, economic revitalization, avoiding excessive mobilization, and experience sharing. Taipei City government's epidemic prevention measures have several features, such as being cost-effective and enforcing strict public management instead of lockdown. For example, at the peak of the pandemic, Taipei City government still opened indoor facilities, including schools, community sports centers, and libraries, but under strict hygiene rules. We also sped up e-government reforms and introduced online education to adapt to remote work and to strengthen the competitiveness of the citizens. We believe that global collaborations is the key to deal with the COVID-19 crisis. This explains why Taipei City government has decided to translate its successful epidemic prevention experience into English and share with its sister cities and other major cities around the world since April 21st this year. The content of Taipei City government's epidemic prevention SOPs can be easily found on our website. We also welcome opportunities to further extend our contribution to other cities. These are Taipei City's commitment to improve the human rights protection around the world. We will work with you all to make the world a better place for all. Last but not least, I would like to commend City Government of Gwangju Korea for their great efforts in organizing such an important event under the shadow of COVID-19. On behalf of Mayor Kerr of Taipei City Government, I would like to extend our strong support to realize the noble cause of the Human Rights Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we hear very well the effective measures taken by Taipei City, including this controlling of the pandemic as well as revitalization of the economy. Thank you very much. Next, I would like to have the next speaker, Ms. Lucia Biamout. She's Equality, Gender Policy and LGBT Counselor of Valencia, Spain. We will also have, oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. Next is the Mayor of Iriga City of the Philippines, my dear friend. I'm so sorry, Mayor Madeline, time is yours. My apology.
Good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night later on. We all know that the pandemic exacerbates social inequalities. So, the Philippines is one of the countries with the highest COVID-19 related cases and deaths in Southeast Asia. When we talk about human rights, we are dealing with the basic rights of freedom that belong to every person in the world from the time he was in the womb of his mother until he passed away. But these rights were limited when policies were enacted to conform and adopt to the new norm. Let me discuss several rights that were curtailed due to the guidelines set forth by our interagency task force. Actually, the topic is really very broad, so allow me to limit and focus on the rights being compromised by the enacted policy. So we have one, declaration of state of public health emergency, freedom of expression, right to the highest attainable standard of health, right to education, immigration, the travel of locally stranded individuals and overseas Filipino workers, mandatory swab PCR tests, protection of health workers and frontliners, and cultural traditions, and of course, data privacy. First is the declaration of a state of public health emergency. It imposes limitations to rights such as the freedom of movements and freedom of expression. As part of the emergency measures, our government imposed a national lockdown, and it severely limits the freedom of movement of everyone in the country. Our guidelines was below 21 years old and above 60 years old, pregnant, immunocompromised, others with comorbidities are not allowed to go out. So we have to notify all our villages with the help of our council and activate their civil service unit to help us implement the national policy. We also have to use other measures so that we can explain to the constituents the reason why we have to implement the lockdown. We have to use the radio, television, live streaming, social media, barker, or soundtrack. Because, people obey laws and comply with rules when they see them as legitimate, not because they fear punishment. Then second is, of course, is the freedom of expression. It is the responsibility of the government to provide information necessary for protection and promoting rights, including the right to health. Only valid and verified information shall be published and shared. We enacted an ordinance, actually, who are apprehending people who are proliferating fake news based on the national government's Bayanihan Act. We can actually ask the policeman to apprehend people who are proliferating fake news. This might create panic or chaos in our society. And how can we come up with good decisions and right decisions if we all based it from lies, not data? That is why we have counter speech and social dialogue with our constituents in a press conference held live stream in Facebook every day, 5 p.m. And then the next is the right to the highest attainable standard of health. Our Constitution provides Article 2, Section 15, that the state shall protect and promote the right to health of the people and instill health consciousness among them, the right access to healthcare, immunization, no discrimination in the hospital regardless, and leaving no one behind. But in our city, we have a problem because we only have 4 private hospitals and all are level 1, meaning they only have 50 to 70 rooms per hospital. And they have no isolation rooms, and they are not capacitated to attend to COVID patients. So all his hospitals here also in the urban areas are not equipped and are not ready to and not prepared to treat the virus. And the next is the right to education. Schools are closed. 21 years old and below are not allowed to go out, no face-to-face classes. To ensure education system respond adequately, our country adopt to variety of modalities to assure continuity of learning. Other teachers use an online platform, but connectivity here in our city is always a dilemma. So we opted to use a synchronous modular type of platform. It is quite expensive, of course, but with the support of all agencies, DepEd, parents, organizations, and LGUs, we will be able to maximize all our available resources. Then eventually advanced digital platform will be learned and will be used. Then in migration, we have the locally stranded individuals and our overseas workers who are repatriated. They are allowed to go home as long as they procure their travel pass and mandatory swab test. They are being deprived of their right to return to their hometown directly, but they have to comply with all the requirements. Since there's no mode of transportation, our transportation here in the Philippines is not yet normal. So they have to, well, the government provided bus and trains and other rented vans and then private cars. Then again, with the no swab test, will undergo a 14-day quarantine facility or quarantine, under 14-day quarantine in our quarantine facilities. Our facilities are not really 5-star hotels. However, they have an option to stay in the accredited hotels at their own expense. The next is the protection of health workers and frontliners. Government have an obligation to minimize the risk of occupational accidents and diseases, including by ensuring workers with health information and adequate protective clothing and equipment. Unfortunately, other areas here in the Philippines, they cannot provide PPEs and other benefits. It is always dependent on the availability of resources. But here in Iriga, we give equitable compensation, hazard pay, healthcare benefits, Magna Carta of health workers, and we also provide housing so they will not be exposed to their families. Then, of course, the traditions and our culture. Comes November, in the celebration of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, it is part of our culture that we visit our loved ones in the cemetery for 3 consecutive days, and we stay until midnight. But however, there's the influx of people is uncontrollable. Social distancing will never be observed. Hence, it is not suitable and conducive for spreading. It is suitable for spreading the virus. So the degree of difficulty to control the people is very high. So that's why we decided to close down all cemeteries. So they will not be allowed to go home and visit their loved ones in the cemeteries. So the cemeteries will be closed from October 29 to November 4. And then last is, of course, the radio frequency identification, RFID, for contact tracing purposes. This is, of course, in contrast with data privacy law. Contact tracing is important and recognized part of any strategy to prevent and monitor the outbreak and spreading of infectious diseases. Manual contact tracing is labor intensive, very, very expensive, and can only trace very limited number of cases. However, security and privacy are always the valid concerns of the RFID. One is to acknowledge that the complex software and hardware environment or smartphones with multiple apps make it more difficult to prevent security issues with smartphone-based contact tracing apps. But with the situation that we have right now, we have no choice but to resort to advanced technology for a faster, accurate, and cheap process of contact tracing. So all these rights may be limited, but there are still parameters that must be followed when applying limitations. Apparently, this is a big challenge to all local chief executives on how to be creative and innovative in implementing measures by not circumventing the law and violating the rights of the people, which means that only the least restrictive measures must be applied and limitations must not be abused or applied in an arbitrary way. Actually, there were reports in the Philippines that the other local officials have subjected people to ill treatment, forced LGBT to do lewd acts in public, and those who violated lockdown rules are kept in dog cages. Imagine. So I just hope justice will be served to all the victims. Now we are facing a long, crucial battle with undetermined path and result. What is clear right now is that more violations of the rights of the people will not help us. Our survival is dependent on protecting the rights of our people and holding on to the principles of democracy and the rule of law. Thank you very much, Doc.
Thank you very much for always having inspired speech. Thank you very much. I also understand the challenges in keeping the discipline of people during this pandemic. Yeah, but thank you, Mayor, once again. Last but not least, I would like to have a video presentation from Miss Lucia Biamout. She's Equality, Gender Policies, and LGBT Counselor of Valencia, Spain. So let's hear her video message.
Enviarles un saludo del alcalde de Valencia, Joan Ribó, y también transmitirles su ánimo a todas las ciudades por la lucha de los derechos humanos. Las ciudades tenemos un papel muy importante en esta lucha, pues es en nosotras, en las ciudades, donde recae el mayor peso poblacional mundial. En consecuencia, es donde se pueden producir los mayores problemas, pero también donde se producen las mayores oportunidades. Es en esta segunda vía, en esta segunda senda, por la cual estamos caminando en la ciudad de Valencia, la de crear oportunidades, la de corregir los posibles problemas que se lleven a cabo. Quisiera también transmitirles nuestro agradecimiento y al cual estamos muy honrados de poder participar en el World Human Rights Cities Forum organizado por la ciudad de Gwangju en Corea del Sur, por lo cual estamos muy agradecidos por vuestra invitación, porque de alguna manera nos permite poder intercambiar diferentes ideas y diferentes acciones políticas en torno a un tema que nos importa muchísimo a todas, que es la de los derechos humanos. La crisis sanitaria del COVID-19 está afectando a nivel mundial, a nivel global, y la cual está suponiendo una crisis sin precedentes y con consecuencias gravísimas sobre la vida, la salud, la economía y los derechos de las personas, el bienestar de las personas. Por lo cual, nosotros decidimos hacer frente a este reto y para ello era necesario articular un diálogo que fuera muy amplio, que tuviera dos elementos esenciales. El primero era que nos pudiera permitir tener una perspectiva inclusiva con el objeto de garantizar las necesidades y los derechos de las personas más básicos. Es decir, no queremos dejar a ninguna persona atrás en este camino, en esta crisis, tal y como sucedió en 2008, que se dejaron a muchas personas atrás. El otro eje es la sostenibilidad. Entendemos que esto es una oportunidad y además tenemos una crisis también ambiental por la cual tenemos que hacerle frente. Con todo ello, creamos una comisión especial de reconstrucción con representación de todos los grupos municipales mediante el consenso y además con la interlocución del tejido social, cívico, académico y empresarial de la ciudad. Este es un plan de reconstrucción hecho por todos y hecho para toda la ciudad, lo cual lo hemos hecho mediante el codiálogo y la corresponsabilidad, implicando a todos los stakeholders. Entendimos que esto era una acción más que prioritaria, porque además nos permite seguir reforzando la confianza colectiva muy necesaria en esta etapa de crisis y también la corresponsabilidad, brindándonos las oportunidades y las herramientas basadas en la resiliencia, la innovación y la cooperación. Tal y como os he comentado, este acuerdo de reconstrucción tiene tres ejes fundamentales. Uno es la salud y la sostenibilidad, el otro es la economía y el otro es el bienestar de las personas, los derechos sociales, en definitiva. Sobre este tercer eje, el de los derechos sociales, nos parecía más que esencial y prioritario poder desarrollar estrategias y acciones que pudieran proteger los derechos sociales. No queríamos que pasase como en la anterior crisis, que el estado de bienestar se fue estrechando cada vez más y más. Lo que queríamos era protegerlo. Y por ello, además, en el confinamiento detectamos diferentes situaciones. Una de ellas era que se pudieron producir una serie de acciones que venían a discriminar y también con posibles delitos de odio. Es por ello que dentro de este tercer eje de los derechos sociales nos pareció fundamental poder desarrollar como acción un plan de convivencia municipal, el desarrollo de una oficina contra la discriminación y los delitos de odio y un observatorio sobre esta materia. Esta acción, estas tres acciones, lo que vienen a complementar es que nos puede ayudar a desarrollar y a estructurar la política local en materia de derechos humanos. Un hecho que culmina el desarrollo y el trabajo que hemos ido implementando durante 5 años en la construcción de un relato. El relato es el de construir de Valencia una ciudad de derechos. Durante 5 años hemos ido implementando diferentes acciones políticas, hemos ido declarando diferentes declaraciones institucionales en diferentes materias, tanto en cuestiones de género, en cuestiones de salud mental, en cuestiones raciales, étnicas, de lengua, en definitiva, en todas las diferentes materias que pueden llevar a hechos discriminatorios o delitos de odio. En ese sentido, como bien os comentaba, este trabajo, estas 3 acciones del Plan de Convivencia, la Oficina de No Discriminación y Delitos de Odio y el Observatorio del mismo, culmina y complementa el trabajo realizado por este gobierno en la ciudad de Valencia, que es de construir Valencia una ciudad de derechos. Sin más, bueno, os animo y seguramente de esta jornada saldrán unas conclusiones muy fructíferas que nos ayudará a todas a seguir trabajando en esta lucha común. Muchísimas gracias por invitarnos a participar de ella.
Thank you very much, Miss Lucia. Now I would like to invite the last speaker for today's session, Miss Alisa Waheed from Indonesia. You have listened so many presentations today. You might want to give a good comments, any comments you think that will be important. Thank you. Please offer to you.
Thank you, Dr. Chandra. Good evening from my part of the world. Good evening, distinguished panelists. And thank you for World Human Rights Cities Forum organizers for inviting me to be a discussant. It has been a pleasure to attend to the presentation of the 3 cities and also the previous presentations. It actually gives hope that amidst the global challenges that we are facing together right now, we are also working through and to the emerging future with a growth mindset and a mindset ripe with a perspective of human rights too. Taipei shared the 5 strategies of strict internal control, advanced deployment, economic revitalization, avoiding excessive mobilization, and experience sharing. This 5 strategy has proved to be excellent, effective, and efficient in making Taiwan as one of the least impacted countries. Service provisions are fully running for citizens. That is fulfilling the rights of the people to enjoy the most of their daily life, while at the same time making sure that control is employed strictly. This is a principle of balance that is very much needed in a human rights city. The fulfillment of human rights to a quality life, but not leading to chaos or the other way around to oppression. Mr. Cho also shared how the Taipei government accelerate the transition to online education to facilitate remote work. And this is also one fundamental character of a human rights city, that is a responsive mindset and agility in facing challenges. Iriga City brought forward this issue of limitations of some human rights of the citizens as a price to keep the most important human rights, that is the rights to life. Mayor Madeline strongly pointed out that these limitations do not warrant ill treatment or violations of human dignity and basic human rights. So thank you for bringing up these very important messages, Mayor Madeline, and also for acknowledging that there are still some chief or executives that, prone to employing tactics or strategies that actually oppress or cross the line of fulfilling human dignity. So thank you again. And also thank you for sharing that synchronous strategy in education is actually the challenge of Indonesia, because we are facing the same the challenge of internet connectivity. But I think in Indonesia, we have not yet moved or progressed to finding alternative than the traditional online education for homeschooling. And this actually leads to a higher, an increase of domestic violence, especially because parents are impatient and they're not well equipped to become substitute teachers. And that's also a failure in the education system to adapt and adjust. in a responsive way and in agility to the current challenges. And I really appreciate the sharing from the Mayor of Valencia that is represented by Ms. Lucia. The strategy is remarkable and deeply rooted in fundamentals of human rights. This is very interesting for me. Like, for example, the two fundamental or essential elements that has been mentioned, that is inclusive perspective to make sure that basic human rights are fulfilled, and also a perspective of sustainability. It is not unusual for cities or even countries to set up a commission, like a commission of on human rights or sustainable development or other strategies. But what strikes me the most in the Valencia sharing is the paradigm guiding the commission and the strategies themselves. Because for me, this is really important. Valencia created a special reconstruction commission with a high element of engagement of stakeholders. And this is the paradigm behind it is to ensure a process of co-creation and co-responsibility. And these two ideas is really fundamental to make sure that the commission will work on the values of human rights. And what's more important for me is to read that this idea is to make sure to strengthen collective confidence, providing tools to build resilience, support innovation, and encourage cooperations. This is truly a human rights approach. And Valencia focuses on three main axes: health and welfare, economy, and people's well-being and social rights. What is interesting is the paradigm on the social rights acts is stated clearly, that is to better detect emerging social needs, including the need to tackle discrimination and hate crimes. Working on and developing communities with the right fundamental paradigms are actually the essence of human rights cities. Without the rights-based principles, the same actions would not ensure the protection and fulfillment of human rights of the citizens. One thing that I would like to be explored more actually from the three cities is how the cities respond to the need of the most vulnerable in the society. Like, for example, the poor families, women and children, the disabled community, and people needing special treatments. Like, for example, people living with HIV needing a ARV treatment, while at the same time, medical facilities are limiting their services. Or maternal health. How do you ensure maternal health in areas, remote areas, that is part of the basic health needs? These are the things that are not explored more in the three sharing, but all in all, from the three best practices and also from others presented to us today, I observed that from these pandemics, we clearly see that we need to sail on the VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, is a responsive, adaptive, reliable, and agile city governance. And I would end with my final conclusion, that listening to the sharing have helped us all strengthen our belief that human rights cities are the future of cities and the future of humanities. Thank you, Dr. Chandra.
Thank you. We believe in the future of cities and the future of humanities. Very good comment. Thank you very much. Next, we go for the discussion, question and answer session. We actually receive several questions, but because of the time limitation, we have to finish in 15 minutes. I'm not sure if we can do that. Let me read just a few of them. One is rural youth are often discouraged. They are unwilling to participate. How do you encourage youth to work for local issues and protect vulnerable people? And the second question is, how do human rights activists respond to the state agents who claim that marginalized communities use human rights claims to organize illegal behaviors like treason? And then the other one, I'm not sure if we have time. Let me read here. Solidarity is necessary in the issue of human rights. Speakers said monitoring to solidarity is important to eradicate corruption. In the pandemic's era, we are facing the era of the fourth industrial revolution in which people and things are connected. Is there any way of solidarity that fits this era, especially related to underprivileged people who need more solidarity, do not have enough chance to use these newly updated technological products? How can we be in unity in this untact era? One of the questions can be to Mayor Vijay. I don't know if Mayor Vijay here. I would like to invite any speakers who would like to answer any of those three questions that I just read just now. Can anybody start?
Yeah,
Please?
I'd just like to, it's Sue from UNESCO. I won't put my camera on because of the internet again. I just wanted to respond to the question about rural youth. And I think that this is a problem that many of us have, is actually effectively reaching out to young people. And it's not that in my own view, it's not that young people don't want to be and can't be engaged. It's the way that we reach out and create the opportunities. So I really think that the best way to do it is to co-create the opportunities with young people, to bring them in, ask them to be part of designing and coming up with the solutions that they want to be part of. And that way they will have a real strong ownership, and they can participate. And you may need to provide some kind of support. It might be a transport issue. There are other difficulties for rural youth compared to other people as well. But I think that if you actually think about it from their perspective, you can come up with a really effective way to bring them in and have them actively participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Yes, I agree. I think co-creation and give the opportunity for the youth to play a role here, and this is a key. Actually, during the pandemic, there have been several people moving from urban to rural side, and they use also their skills to mobilize also support from the other young people, and started with digitalization, including this online platform on education, as well as online platform of encouraging small, medium businesses. I think there's several innovations that came up during this pandemic. We see also as opportunity for young people to be creative in this regards. So yes, anybody else would like to answer any of the questions? Yes, Mayor.
Yeah, this is about the solidarity of human rights. That was the third question, right? The right to international solidarity is a human right by which individuals and people are entitled on the basis of equality and non-discrimination. And of course, to participate meaningfully. So it means it has to be inclusive. It always has to be inclusive, leaving no one behind. And solidarity is a tool for reducing inequality and social justice in the world. So that's why we really need solidarity, helping each other and be united in order to fight for our right.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor Mardel. I think during this COVID, we see clearly the solidarity has increased. you know, we see a big support from all kind of communities and also stakeholders and providing some helps to their neighborhoods as well as through donation. I think we have seen it clearly, especially in the urban areas. This is the areas that are affected most compared to the rural areas. I think this is we see clearly also during this web share sessions that we have. I don't know if Rebecca, you also would like to say to answer those questions before.
Yeah.
Before I close this. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. The most affected amongst the poor are those that live in the rural areas. So that's farmers, fishers, and rural women and rural youth. My organization actually has mobilized the rural youth, in fact, to do a lot of work in terms of not only emergency responses and livelihood opportunities identification. We also have mobilized them in campaigns in order to take on the issues of education, because that is what is affecting them most right now. So we have provided the venues. We had facilitated the talks with the youth, with the UN Office of the Human Rights, how do you call that? The advisor of the Human Rights Office to the UN country team in the Philippines. So we started the conversations already.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if anybody else would like to answer the questions.
Yes, can I contribute to question number 2?
Yes.
Yeah, the question is about how human rights activists respond to state agents who claim that marginalized communities use human rights claim to organize illegal behavior, right? And this is also happening in Indonesia. And I think one of the instruments that we can employ is actually setting up a commission on human rights that is that comprise of partly of state actors and also from civil society. So it's more like autonomous body of the state, not under the executive branch of the state, but also given the authority to explore and deep diving on the issues, and even given the authority to mediate conflicts. Like, for example, in Indonesia, we have the National Commissions on Human Rights, and sometimes these national commissions are the one that people turn to, and they are the one having the authority and also at the same time having the neutrality to explore and also to do fact finding, and with that, with an instrument of standard and norms of human rights and everything, then we can mitigate the accusations and also the abuse of authority employed by state agents in facing the marginalized community. That's my thought.
Thank you very much. I think you mentioned very right about the importance of having evidence and proof. And this is very important, especially for policymakers as well, because some of the policies should be based on the, evidence, and so that we can make right policies for the people. Thank you very much. I think I really need to end this session. I think we offer, we go until 10:20 now, 10:30. I think this has been a very, very good session. I think you should join me and give a big applause to all speakers and commentators. You cannot hear maybe a big applauses, but I'm very sure all of your contributions have been appreciated very by participants. So thank you once again to share innovation, initiatives, whatever practices you have in responding to COVID, and also talking about recovery plans. I think from the presentations, we have been very clear that local governments have made already good actions because they are the frontliner, and they have they have a very important role to play in protecting the life of the people, as well as in providing and continuously providing public services. And local governments also have put human rights approach in whatever actions they have. This is including also in the education sector, making sure that education for all also has been addressed here. And in terms of economic recovery, revitalization, we see also some of the initiatives of the local governments in providing supports to rental houses and also homeowners. I think that's also quite important, and small, medium-sized businesses. And then also providing good accommodation, good homes for migrants, and hopefully they can also be given permanent houses for the homeless. And then also the importance of addressing gender equality, gender-based decision-making processes, and gender-based also actions that also been seen very clearly in many presentations to address also inequality, and also address the importance of vulnerable groups, not only women, but also important of migrants. I think this has been very excellent discussion and very productive. And I understand that United Nations also released a new resolution on Tuesday on local governments and human rights, highlighting the pandemic consequences. I think it will be good also to collect Asian local government experiences, and hopefully we can work further in promoting the human rights in our cities and our regions, because we believe that we have a better future for ourselves and our communities and our societies, and of course for the new generation. So once again, I would like to thank Gwangju City Government, UCLG and UCLG ASPAC for organizing this session. And I wish everybody stay safe and remain healthy. We know that, but we have to believe in ourselves that we can pass through these situations successfully. I know this is not easy for everyone, but looking at presentations and innovations, I think we are very sure that we are able to promote further these human rights in our cities and our region. So thank you once again also to organizers, to interpreters. That has been a very good session, and always smile, because this is how we can increase our immune system. So stay safe, everyone. So thank you once again. So Amanda, offer to you if you like to add some more. I think we still have 2 or 3 minutes here.
Well, I think we are over time, but thank you all. Thank you to the speakers for participating to this very interesting debate. And thank you to you, Bernadia and UCLG-ASPAC for organizing this session.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody.
Bye,
Stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Ma'am
Muchas
Becky.
gracias.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Sampai jumpa.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to participants.
Thank you, Doc.
Kamsahamnida.
Kamsahamnida. Thank you, Nadia from Spain. So from France, yes, and also from Spain. Amanda, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Amanda.
you.
Gracias.
Merci Nadia, merci encore pour l'intervention.
Merci.
Also to Gwangju. Bye.
Bye.